Hey, over the last 20 or 30 years, you ever catch one of these people who goes out on TV or is caught doing a sermon at some little local church and they're like, this horrible natural tragedy that killed a whole bunch of people, that's because some people out there vote for the wrong party and do these things. I'm telling you, they're related. It makes me sad to see it happen, but it's just so terrible, and that's the judgment of God. And in a sense, isn't anything that goes wrong just an indictment on the brokenness of humanity and the mess that we've made together? So yeah, maybe there's that. But in general, tonally, that just feels like it's coming from such a wrong-headed, weird, backwards place. And how could that person know? And I think one of the most natural pushbacks on those kind of sweeping pronouncements that you get from time to time in modern, particularly, I think, evangelical thought, one of the biggest pushbacks is just, how could you know? How do you know the connection? Like, who told you that? Who revealed that to you? Are all the other things you say equally true if you claim that that was revealed by God? I think there's an appropriate level of pushback and skepticism from both within the church and outside the church on those kinds of generalizations and things that occasionally from the fringes you'll hear certain Christians say these days. That said, those kinds of remarks and the right skepticism we feel toward them should not be allowed to reflect back negatively on points in the Bible where that 1 + 1 = 2 thing actually does happen. Jesus, who is allowed to judge everything, occasionally makes judgments and says there is a judgment, and it's a just judgment, and it's happening. And he's initiating that kind of language at the end of chapter 23 of the book of Matthew and into chapter 24. His closing remarks at the end of chapter 23, as we've discussed for the last couple of days, have a strong air of the ancient structure of a lamentation over a people defeated, an era past, a judgment pronounced. But there's also like fresh judgment mixed into that as well. Matthew 23:37, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I've longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wing, but you weren't willing. Now we get into the part I'm talking about now. Look, your house is left to you desolate, for I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Look, your house is left to you desolate. Well, now, how would people have received that at this moment? We're on Passover week, what we now call Passion Week, roughly 30-ish AD. There's some slight debate about what exact year Jesus was born and therefore what exact year he was crucified, but give or take a little bit, 30 AD. You've got a relatively stable political regime working in conjunction with a very stable global empire in Rome. I mean, sure, you got some religious friction. The religious leadership who are getting pushed back on in this passage are definitely testing the boundaries with the new governor, Pontius Pilate. So far, it seems like they've won most of those political standoffs with him. The religious leadership as a social class has got tons of money, tons of clout. Rome, even though you don't like them, does provide quite a bit of stability, and that it's not like you're going to get invaded by your neighbors again. There are really only two parties in all of the Roman Empire. It's the Roman Empire and whoever they're governing and have conquered locally. But that's it. You got a vast network of roads and commerce from all around the empire and even outside the boundaries of the empire. People are getting crazy rich. There's some provision against deep famine, the kind of deep famines that had punctuated the years in the past, because you've got the wealth of Egyptian grain and now Roman management. And if something goes wrong there, you've got grain from the European continent. There's just a lot of different ways for the empire to have its needs met. And on top of that, you got all of these massive renovations and expansions to the Second Temple that the Herod family has made at great expense. This is the biggest and fanciest the temple and the temple system, for that matter, have ever been. And from a Pharisee's perspective, like, they all know Jesus is dead. Like, you can say all this stuff and go on about how bad we are, and we'll just have to sit there and take that. But like, joke's on you, dude. We've already made the maneuvers behind the scenes to make sure you're dead. We just about have the deal closed. So keep running your mouth. It'll just make it easier to do what we need to do next. In light of that, from their perspective, when Jesus says, look, your house is left to you desolate, if I'm a Pharisee, I'm like, scoreboard? Like, look, you landed a few punches with the woes and everything, and the few people who are standing here, they're probably going to remember that you said that, but you're going to be gone really soon, and we're still going to be here. And we have all this stuff, and you're homeless. So I don't know what house you're looking at, buddy, but I'd say it looks anything but desolate from where I stand. Well, I think we can read Jesus' words two ways. One, it's just an extension of the pronouncements of woes, and he is saying, you are vacuous. You got no heart. You got nothing inside of you. So it looks like your house is flush with all the things that you're picturing in your brain right now, but you're frauds. You got no soul. You got no riches. The emperor has no clothes. You can take solace in the material possessions you've accumulated through ill-gotten gain. You can take solace in the titles and the honorific things that people say to you around town, but it's all fake. That's one way to read his words. You got a house, but it's desolate. But another way to read Jesus' remarks is as though they were anticipatory of the destruction of that grand temple that they're standing right next to just 40 years down the road at the hands of Titus and Vespasian. I could go on and on about that, but it's going to come up so much more in the next chapter that I'll just tease that and leave it sitting there. And I suppose a third option is that both can be true. The temple is going to be destroyed in 40 years, and it was. And you guys are frauds, and it looks like you have a bunch of stuff, but you don't. Or if you do have it, you're not going to have it for very long. But this gets us into something we're going to talk about so much in the upcoming chapter, and that is the order of events, the timeline that we draw from what Jesus is saying here. When does all of this go down? What, like Aaron was talking about the other day, very competently, I might add, what do we mean here by generation? How is this going to unfold? Well, there's a certain way to interpret everything Jesus said about how all the stuff is going to unfold that very much pivots on that destruction of the temple. There's another way to read how all of these things are going to unfold that acknowledges the destruction of the temple and acknowledges that Jesus sees that coming and is giving it a nod, but that doesn't view that as the central and big picture judgment that serves as the interpretive cipher for the language through the rest of the New Testament about how the rest of time is going to play out, how God's judgment is going to play out regarding these things. We have plenty of time to sort all of that out once we get into chapter 24. All I want to point out here is that this statement about desolation is not just a prediction, it's a statement of reality in the moment. Therefore, to read this as, your house has been left desolate and it will continue to be desolate for some time into the future, is a reasonable read. And there's another twist of the knife here that I got to acknowledge. That use of the word desolate or desolation would have taken everybody's minds right back to Daniel 9 and verse 27, where Daniel looks like he was talking about what happened under the reign of the generals who followed after Alexander the Great and how they tried to Greekify the Jewish people and how even they went and did stuff in the temple that is unclean and idolatrous. It looks like that's what Daniel's talking about in Daniel 9, where it says, and on a wing of the temple he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. Now, if that is a reference to Antiochus Epiphanes and the Greek overlords who polluted the temple, which caused the Maccabean rebellion, the thing that Hanukkah is a celebration of, that brought about the successful revolution that created a Jewish state until the Romans shut it down in the mid-1st century BC, if that passage in Daniel is a reference to that series of events, and the Pharisees certainly interpreted it that way, Daniel 9:27 to them was a demonstration that God had predicted that they would throw off their Greek overlords and win that fight, then what Jesus is doing by including the term desolate is he's suggesting that you guys are the ones who pollute the temple. Yeah, sure, maybe Antiochus Epiphanes and the Greeks did that, but you guys own that thing. That is your albatross. And that is very much in keeping with the theme of, theoretically, you're the ones who preserve all of this and connect everyone with God. But Jesus is saying, you're the ones who caused this desolation. You've emptied the temple of its riches and its meaning and left it with nothing. This destruction is on you. And just so that you don't think I'm stretching out this connection here with Daniel chapter 9, put a pin in that word desolate, that phrase, abomination of desolation, because just turning one page over to Matthew chapter 24, we are going to see that phrase used again. I'm going to hit pause there. We're going to talk just a little bit more about this lamentation, and then we're going to roll into chapter 24. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.